Welcome in to episode 027 of the Modern Dealer Podcast. My name is David Farmer with Entice, and with me, as always, is David Bertoncini. How you doing, David?
Well, I'm not physically in the studio today. As you can see, my replacement is sitting in my seat today. But I'm feeling under the weather. We'll say that to kick off 2020. May have picked up a cold visiting my good friend that we have on the show today, Lloyd Truschell. And so I did contract some lovely cold up in the great Pacific Northwest. But aside from that, I am well. I'm here. I'm ready to do the show remotely from my house. So I figured I wouldn't get anybody at the studio sick, so I would stay away for this episode, but I'll be back next week. If you're new to our podcast and you'd like to get some updates and some weekly content, please be sure to subscribe. Catch us on iTunes. Please turn on notifications.
Ding!
Ding, right there on YouTube. And just check us out on our Facebook page. But we have with us a returning guest that I met with earlier this week, and then I got sick and had to bail out of the Pacific Northwest 18 hours ago, and I reappeared down here in Florida. But we're joined with Lloyd.
Lloyd Truschell, how are you doing, sir?
Doing wonderful, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to do it. So, episode 027, this is actually our year in review part 2, which works out extremely well to have Lloyd join us because he was on one of our episodes as a very special guest when he was down here in Tampa. So Lloyd is joining us from his home in Seattle, and David Bertoncini, of course, his home in St. Pete. So we're kind of bi-coastal for this episode, and we're going to kind of pick up where we left off, which was episode 015. So 015 for us was actually, I think it is the highest viewed episode that we've released so far, which was CarMax versus Carvana. And that was a really cool episode. That really gave us the ability to kind of look at, two of the biggest online retailers, CarMax being online and offline, and Carvana really being online only. However, one of the things that I discovered when I was doing a little bit of research is how much effort CarMax is putting into their online services. And that's one of the things I thought was pretty cool, where they've opened 2, maybe even 3 online centers for servicing online shoppers only. 300 people working in at each location, so that's pretty cool. So I think that episode 015, as I'm kind of scrubbing the timeline here, I think that was also the episode that I got my new Apple Watch and I broke it the same day, which is kind of a shit deal. But there's the picture of it right there. So that was kind of a crappy thing. But that actually brings us into what you talked about in the article that you had wrote for F&I and Showroom magazine with having AppleCare. And I love the comparison that you used with AppleCare versus a vehicle service contract. As you were writing that, Lloyd, what kind of made you think about utilizing that as a comparison? What are some of the things that made sense and kind of resonated with you with AppleCare versus a vehicle service contract?
Well, a lot of it comes down to the ease of purchasing AppleCare. So if you're in the Apple store, the clerk doesn't do a fancy presentation or menu you or try to overcome any objections or anything. It's a very simple question. Would you like to add AppleCare? That's it. And so thinking about that and having bought a lot of Apple products, not just for myself personally, but business and family and so on, and every one of these experiences, it made me wonder, all right, well, I wonder what their penetration is on AppleCare. And of course, Apple's not giving that out. However, I found an investor's report from Best Buy where they were talking about AppleCare and the level of penetration that they had. And I went, oh, there we go. There's my number. That's fantastic. And that's a good number too, whenever you consider it. The idea that just making the offer, people seeing the value in it, and then they hook up basically 2/3 of the time, relative to the automotive industry, when you're getting data from NADA, and that number seems to fluctuate between 30 and 40% for the last 25 years. You go, okay, well, perhaps the pressure of trying to overcome objections and do this great big presentation, everything lends ourselves to actually having a lower penetration, because people start to feel the sales pitch and then their defenses start to go up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. And I do believe that there is this inherent understanding that AppleCare truly is a value. And there is this thought where vehicle service contracts in automotive is not really of value. It's something that we're pushing on people. And I think it's that perception that as you're selling it, maybe that's coming across in the way that we're presenting the product. We're presenting in more of a salesy type of position versus more of a value proposition.
Well, you certainly have that. I mean, let's be realistic. If you're sitting in the box, you're concerned about, obviously closing the deal. Why? Because that's how you keep your job. That's how you make your money. If you don't close the deal, then the guy with the insurance company is going to be, getting on to you about what your numbers look like. Your GM's going to be getting on to you about what your numbers look like. The entire dealership and everybody, sorry, my phone's going off at the same time. No, you're going to have, there's pressure. And whenever we add pressure, the behavior that we have, the sell attitude starts coming out. And whether it's a good offer or it's not a good offer, whether it's a good quality product or not, whether the price is fair or not, all that kind of goes out the window because the customer starts to feel the push. And when they start to feel the push, they start to get defensive about it. And that's really a huge problem that we have in our industry. And the easiest way, and it's the easiest thing in the world to explain, the hardest thing in the world to do, but is to let go of the outcome.
Right.
The AppleCare guy doesn't really care. He's not being commissioned on it, nor is he going to lose his job if you don't buy AppleCare. He just asks you, do you want to add AppleCare? It's very simple. F&I managers that are going, hey, would you like to add extended coverage? And letting go of the outcome, relaxing with it a little bit, and being willing to go and engage anywhere in the conversation with the customer about coverage, that guy's going to close quite a few service contract sales. Alternatively, when the entire dialogue is about trying to close the customer or use fear tactics to scare the customer into it, then the customer has to go ahead and start protecting themselves a little bit, so it's a different narrative and it's a different conversation.
Yep, absolutely. You know what kind of reminds me, David Bertoncini and Lloyd, we go back to selling cars in the late 90s at a Toyota dealership in Pinellas Park, Florida. And one of the salespeople that we worked with at the time, I think did a fantastic job of letting go of the outcome. And that's Jim Keys. It's like he didn't care whether or not he sold a car. From his attitude, he would, one of the things I used to love about Jim and watching him sell cars, he's a 30 car a month guy and has been for probably 30 years in the business, true professional. But what I used to love about him is that as he was sitting there in a close with a salesperson, he would sit there and water his plants. He wouldn't even care about what was going on, and he'd just sit there and have that kind of let go of the outcome and just sell and just have a conversation. So I think that was a great illustration of exactly kind of the differences. That Apple employee really doesn't have a vested interest in selling the AppleCare, although I'm sure that they have statistics on why it's important, but it really comes down to providing a great value. And I think Bertoncini, you probably been in on a few closes with Jim Keys over the years, and tell me if I'm wrong. He just didn't care, right?
Now he's got a very, he is perception that he doesn't care, but he really is just very relaxed. So like, just like if you're at Best Buy and you're just buying something simple, you're buying some AirPods, right? And they ask you if you want to get the Apple Care to it, and they just make it so nonchalant. Like, would you like to add Apple Care to that? I mean, it's almost like in 2020, this being the January 2nd, 2020, it's like moving forward, it would be a very soft sell. It's like, would you like to get basically Apple Care for your car? I mean, you can use that as a comparison, telling a customer, it's like, well, think of this protection like having Apple Care for your vehicle, but even better.
That would be a very strong close. Well, we don't want to get too far away from our year in review. I mean, this is our recap for the Modern Dealer Podcast, episode starting off with episode 015 going into 016. We talked about unique selling propositions. We talked about lifetime warranty. We talked about the Amazonification of the automotive industry. We talked a little bit about digital retailing. One of the things I love about a unique selling proposition like lifetime warranty is I think it ties into what we were just talking about with the selling of Apple Care, where lifetime warranty or a unique selling proposition is something that you include as a dealership, as a extended value proposition if you choose to do business with one dealership over another, but you're really not selling that product. But it comes in a great way to kind of sell the dealership of all the great reasons why you should purchase from one dealership or another. So utilizing a lifetime warranty or something like that as a unique selling proposition. And then also, Lloyd, I think that one of the things that I like to see in the automotive industry is really when dealers are really embracing a sales process at a dealership as a unique selling proposition. So things that make a dealership unique in the marketplace by how they sell, whether that's one price or they have like an express sales process where they make it easy, full transparency into what the process is. So I know you work with a lot of different dealerships. Are you finding that there are more and more dealerships adopting more of an express type of sales process, and are they using that in their brand message and unique selling proposition?
I think you see dealers that are on two sides of this. You've got a lot of people that understand what's going on with Carvana, and they see the numbers that are coming in. They see a lot of stores that are trying to, we've had this for years if you think about it. Mm-hmm. How many, go back 20 years and you started seeing AutoNation doing the guaranteed 1 hour, we're going to get you out. The idea that back then to try and expedite the process, to try and make it go smoother for the customer. And, to that end, a lot of people respond to that. A lot of people, they don't want to spend endless hours in a dealership negotiating. They want to come in, they want to get it over with, so much so that they'll pay more for the vehicle. How many people that are willing to go into a non-haggle environment just so they can get it over with? Now, I would say that there's some cynical people in there that feel like they're going to pay more than they should anyway, but at the same time, the idea that it's a one price environment, they feel like there's a fairness to it. And so there's some comfort in that because you're not going to find out that you got your head ripped off in a one price environment. I think that's a belief. Yeah. They go, well, I bought for the same amount that somebody else would have. Now, that's not to say that the profitability isn't better in a negotiation store. The negotiating store clearly has the opportunity to outprice a one price store. We see this all the time. And to that end, I think it is kind of difficult for a lot of the one price dealers to go ahead and stick to their guns when occasionally, they know that they're going to lose a customer. The customer is going to go down the street. They're going to say, well, I can buy that, that car or that truck for $200 less down the road. And a lot of those stores, I mean, it takes discipline to go, well, go get it.
Yep.
You know, but they have to have confidence that they're creating a superior sales process. Interestingly enough, though, we find that those stores and virtually every other store, there's the transparency word, the buzzword, if you will, transparency. And it's interesting. I got in a car accident in July and I totaled my truck. So I've been out in the market. I didn't do it right away. Most of my time spent on the road in rental cars. So I wasn't in a hurry to replace it right away. But recently I've been out doing the car sales stretch myself and or shopping rather. And every single dealership is the same thing. You know, hey, we provide full transparency, whether they're negotiating or not. And I tend to go to a store that's wants to negotiate because I'm going to look at what values are and try and find something. I'm not trying to nickel and dime anybody down to nothing, but I also am not going to pay too much. I'm in the business. I know better. But every single store, they use the word transparency. And, you know, that's one of these things where transparency means different things to different people. You know, there's different layers of transparency. And I think that among the things that we run into in the one price or negotiation models where everybody's saying, you're going to get the best service from us and we have a fully transparent process. Yeah, it means different things to different people. And so I think that you're going to find that word becomes a little bit of a turnoff in the coming years.
Yeah. I think the execution of taking an internal process and utilizing it as a marketing message can be very successful, but I think it really comes down to making sure that you are executing on whatever that brand promise is. You mentioned AutoNation and their 1 hour in and out process, their express buying process. That's something that they struggled with, and David Bertoncini spent a lot of time in AutoNation stores, not only as a salesperson, but as a sales manager, general sales manager, and really tried to make some of those processes work. But I think it maybe, it came from the execution wasn't there from a training perspective, and making sure that all of the people and the departments were in sync with what was supposed to happen. Is that what your experience is, Mr. Bertoncini?
Yeah, what happens online and to transpire into the dealership was never been a smooth transition for AutoNation. So I think that's where they had a lot of struggles and a lot of failures. I can't speak for them now in 2020.
Right.
I'm not sure if their processes have been improved at all or anything like that. But as far as the buzzword, we'll call it transparency in the automotive industry, when people are saying, we're transparent, we have a very transparent process. Well, what customers would rather take over transparency is convenience. You can go to, you can go through the drive-through at some place and just get something quick and satisfy that need to eat something. But to have a sit down, something good to eat, then you're going to take a little bit more time. But people will take the convenience over everything. Just as in this episode that we talked about, episode 16 we're on, the Amazonification of the automobile industry, being people want convenience. Transparency is there because, we can't do the old Foursquare, let's hide the numbers. You got to be transparent by showing, hey, our transparency is we show you what you're paying in sales tax and really what your monthly payment is and how much you're financing. I do believe that is their transparency. It's convenience, which will always win. The customer will take convenience over everything else.
Yeah, so great transition into episode 17, 5 tenets of digital retailing. The first one being flexibility, the second being consistency, the third, transparency, the fourth, simplicity, and then maybe I got I missed one of them. It doesn't matter. The 5 tenets of digital retailing, that was done by Driving Sales. They did an end of year article about digital retailing. Highly recommend that you check that out. It's pretty cool. And as to both of your points, I think the new modern brand story that dealerships really should be embracing has to include things like transparency, has to include things like convenience. We look at Carvana as as this successful company selling, 100,000 vehicles last year. Last quarter, they sold almost 50,000 vehicles. So they're succeeding at this idea of convenience as their core benefit for customers buying a vehicle from them. So much so that they're investing in vending, vehicle vending machines all over the country, right? And the whole idea of a vending machine, that is kind of the personification of convenience, right? You put a coin in, you get your car. How much more convenient is that as a personification of the sales process, right?
I thought vending machines were really awesome when I lived in Japan, and you can get beer out of a vending machine. That was really cool.
Very convenient too, right? Awesome. So episode 17, moving into 18, we talked more about online retailing. We focused a little bit on Vroom. One of the things I remember about that episode is we really talked about how much public money is being funneled into the automotive industry. One of the things that me and Lloyd were talking about before you joined us on the Zoom meeting today, David, was the Seattle area and how much of a tech hub that is. Vroom really looks at themselves as a technology company. Carvana really looks at themselves as a technology company, and the amount of money that they're raising into this industry really is amazing. $100 million, $300 million. There's a $50 million investment by I think Lithia into one of these other online retailers, maybe even Vroom. But for a little bit more context around public money that's moving into the automotive industry, I would recommend going back and watching episode 018 of the Modern Dealer Podcast. I think that was our Halloween episode. And then we moved into episode 19, which is where we had our special guest, Lloyd, joining us. And in that episode, we talked about an article that he wrote in F&I and Showroom Magazine about Amazon. We touched on that a little bit about the AppleCare comparison to vehicle service contracts. Now, I do want to bring up another recent article that Lloyd wrote for that same magazine, F&I and Showroom Magazine. And in this one, he talked about his daughter who is looking at making a life decision about education and career paths, and what are some of the options that are available, and just the expense of looking at a career that requires a degree such as a law degree. What was the inspiration really on this article, Lloyd, that made you think about making the comparison between going to school and becoming a lawyer and looking at the automotive industry as a place to educate yourselves and become a great career choice?
Well, this is a situation where a lot of information was coming to us from different avenues. To begin with, in her junior year, we were looking for a data entry person in our office. Somebody would just sit down and punch customer information and VIN numbers into our CRM and our database. And what was interesting in it is, this is a job that doesn't pay traditionally well just for doing data entry. And we received maybe 150 resumes for a data entry position. Out of the 150 resumes, I'm going to speculate and say about 90 of them had college degrees. These are people that, that had, they graduated, they went on to college, they've got a degree and God knows what. And here they are. Here they are looking to just sit in a cubicle and punch in information on contracts, one after the other. And what I ended up doing was I took the stack of resumes home, and I had my daughter join me at the kitchen table. And I said, I want to show you something. And we started going through resumes one after the other. I said, you have to understand there's a paramount difference between having a degree and having an education. It's huge. Just because you have that piece of paper does not mean that you have the education. And the education is really what people pay for. I heard somebody not too long ago make a statement about we have boom and bust, and we have recessions from time to time. And this gentleman who I respect was making an assessment of the coming tragedy, if you will, that in the very near future, people are going to be running scared looking for somebody with gray hair. And I laughed about it, but the more I've thought about it and the more conversation I've had, you realize that, people that are just truly knowledgeable in their profession, that they're few and far between. And I run into this with attorneys and doctors, and, you go, okay, there are very few people that are truly experts in their profession. That was one thing. Second thing is there was a barista at our local Starbucks and over in Fishhawk, and he had a degree in political science and psychology, and he's working at Starbucks, and that is something that hits the radar also. Not to mention that the conversation that her and I had was, Dad, I don't want to be a lawyer, and that was kind of the idea that we had at one point. And, I felt like it would be good for her to do it and specialize in the automotive industry, because there's a lot of advice and information that I can put her into. And there's a lot of really good attorneys that I know that she could learn from and really kind of niche. And, but she wants to do fashion, and that's where her passion is. And so falling back a little bit and going, okay, let's look at this realistically. If I fund her company, she really learns nothing. Right. And if she funds it herself, and if she's self-made, then, if her company doesn't take off overnight, she still has the skills in her back pocket to make a living.
Absolutely. And I'm going to stop you there real quick, because we're coming up on a hard break. Okay. We're gonna take a break here in just a second. Then we're gonna come back and finish up with that, and then also see how this transitions into the opportunities that are in the automotive industry for millennials, Gen Z, people coming up 18, 19 years old. So we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna be right back.
Buying a car should be easy. Say hello to Shopper Express, the way car buying should be. With Shopper Express, once you find your car, you can get our best price up front with no hassles. You can personalize your individual payment by selecting from financing or leasing options. Select your desired finance or lease term, adjust your down payment, even research all the available offers, rebates, and incentives, and then apply them to your deal. You can get a personalized trade-in value from Kelley Blue Book instantly. And in just minutes, you can get an express cash offer for your trade-in that's good for 7 days. Plus, research and select available protection plans. You can apply for financing and even get your credit score without your Social Security number. Configure your entire purchase transaction from anywhere in just minutes. Schedule an express delivery, so when you're ready to buy, you can be in and out in an hour or less, or request to have your next car delivered to you. Enjoy a better way to buy a car with Shopper Express.
Welcome back into the second segment of episode 027 of the Modern Dealer Podcast. Today we have David Bertoncini in St. Pete. We got Lloyd Truschel in Seattle. And we got David Farmer in the MDP studios just north of Tampa. We're excited to get back into what we were talking about. Lloyd recently wrote an article that was published in F&I and Showroom magazine, really looking at the outlook of education and getting a degree, getting that piece of paper, versus really looking at the opportunity to get a true education and really looking at the automotive industry as a great career path. And I know that kind of cut you off a little bit short. We had a hard stop with our recording equipment here, so I had to do that. Was there any final thoughts that you had on that before we kind of get into anything else?
Yeah, it's super important to remember that, a degree and an education are not the same thing. And I wasn't dissuading my daughter from getting an education at all. It's just that the idea of acquiring student loan debt in a profession that you're not in love with, that's one problem. The second problem is, in the first 7 years that like lawyers are going to school for 7 years, that they're not earning income. So if we look at this from age 18 or 19 to age 30 and all the years that you're not putting any money in the bank and not trying to build a business, yes, you're working on your education, but when you come out, you can be $200,000 to $300,000 in debt and making $68,000 a year. And that's one of the huge problems. And the other problem that you run into is that, and this is not from my article, but it's from the Wall Street Journal, there's over 100,000 attorneys that are working in other professions right now. For her to not take on any debt and to just keep acquiring capital, and she is studying fashion on the side, and she's in classes right now that she's doing that while she's in the car business. She's just building up a nest egg, and she's building up investment capital to go into this. We started her company now with a 10-year plan to be profitable. So she doesn't have to. It's like a lot of people start businesses, and the biggest reason businesses fail is because the idea is that you have to turn a profit right away. Mm-hmm. And that's not at all what she's doing. She has a 10-year plan to build her brand, to figure out the products that she's going to retail, to go ahead and understand social media marketing and how to really design products that have, a good value to society, and sit and work and spin deals and sit in the trenches while managing her company until she gets to the point where her business is more profitable than remaining in the car business. It's a good place to be, in my opinion. She felt the same way. And ironically, I thought I'd get a lot of pushback from attorneys after writing that article. I fully expected to get a lot of hate mail, if you will, but it's been the exact opposite. There's been so many people that had practiced law at one point or another that have reached out to me and said, hey, what you're saying is absolutely true. I found my way to the car business, and it's a better quality of life than what I had before, especially a lot of attorneys that came out of law school and went to work for these big firms, but they're not partner. They're not making money. If they're in public sector, they're not making very much money at all. If they're in the private sector, it's really hard to market and bring people in the door. So you end up working for bigger law firms, but they just don't pay that well. The firm itself gets the lion's share of the commission and on these cases. And so the burnout's extremely high because you're working your butt off chasing all the debt that you acquired from all those years being in school, so it's a tough road, no doubt. And not to take away from the nobility of being an attorney, because the article solely talks about the economics first 10 years. And it's not meant to discuss the nobility. Somebody that's arguing a case in front of the Supreme Court about civil rights or something like that is a far cry from an F&I manager getting a 400 beacon score bought on an Impala. It's an entirely different animal. But from an economic standpoint, from age 18 to 30, it can absolutely give you a head start in life.
Well, you know what? So moving into episode 020, and I know that, David, you have something you want to talk about real quick. I want to come back to that. But in episode 020, we talked about the generational divide between the people that are in automotive now, people that are our age or a little bit older, and that new generation that's coming in, millennials, Generation Z. We use the OK Boomer as the internet meme OK Boomer as a way to kind of illustrate the difference between baby boomer generation and the millennials and Generation Z, which I think is a great topic that I'd like to get into a little bit further. And I know that for 2020, every year, what I like to do at our first day back into the office, which is today for our recording, we do a roundtable about really what we see 2020 or the next year unfolding and really where our core vision is. So we have a 2020 vision for this year, boom. But really looking at the external customers as far as customers that are purchasing products from automotive dealerships, and the internal customers being the salespeople, being the sales managers, and how important it is to really understand that you have that internal customer that are digitally native. So those millennials, Generation Z coming into the industry, and then you have managers, the baby boomers or our generation, Generation X, managing them. But before we go any further with the generational divide, I knew you had a couple points that you wanted to make about the education process and the industry, automotive. Correct, David?
Yeah, it actually segues right into episode 020, because the generational divide and talking about, tagging onto what Lloyd's daughter is going through. My little sister-in-law has a full scholarship to go to college. She experienced while going to college, she's not making any money, although she's studying to become she wanted to be a physician. But during that journey, summertime, she's like, okay, well, I kind of want to work. I want to make some money. I introduced her to the automobile industry. I knew she was a naturally phenomenal salesperson. She went in, sold, I think 12 cars the first month, next month 16, got up to 21 cars, and she's been steady about 18 to 20 cars a month. And, so she's crushing it right now, 6 months into it. She's 19 years old, and she came to the point when, school started again. She's like, do I want to pursue this, or am I getting, she feels, a much better education, not just the money she's making, but she's learning these negotiation skills, these people skills, all types of skills that she would not have learned pursuing her degree as a physician, as an oncologist. She would, I'll give you an example. My mother is a physician for the last 45 years, phenomenal physician. But as far as people skills goes and telling somebody like you're sick, her delivery sometimes is not the best. So it cannot be taught. She tells some people some god-awful stuff, and it's like, people look at her and like, could you given that to me a little softer or something? But what she's going to learn, my little sister-in-law is in the automobile industry, that, she's going to pick up these people skills, these negotiation skills. She's going to learn so much more while making a tremendous living, using this as a career path, which may journey her into something else, just like, Lloyd's daughter. This is a career path to get to her ultimate goal of being in fashion, that, she's going to learn so much more from the automobile industry than she would have learned, burying herself in debt in a classroom environment that's never going to give her the experience. And we'll pay for experience versus, a piece of paper saying, yeah, I know how to do it, but can I apply it? The application of actually doing that process. And I myself, I know a lot of guys in the car business have and have not attended college. I didn't attend college myself. I went to the U.S. Navy. Yep. Immediately after I got out of the Navy, I went into the car business. I was out of the Navy on a Monday, flew down from Seattle on Tuesday, in the car business on Wednesday. interviewed at Sutherland on Wednesday. So I didn't have that, but my education through what I learned through the U.S. military, through the United States Navy, going around the world, I felt those 5 years, 4.5, 5 years I was in, I felt like I got more experience in education than somebody coming out with a degree right out of college, because I felt like I had better experience and life skills that felt more useful in, the real world application at the time. But I mean, it could go either which way. I mean, it could be that, if somebody wants to pursue that and they know for sure they want to be a physician and they're going to put those 12 years in to become a physician, that's great. But if it's just like, hey, I want to get a degree in communications to have this piece of paper, like Lloyd said, to work at Starbucks, come on. I mean, does that make sense? It probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's like, you get a good experience education through someplace that you could work at. A friend of mine, one more thing, just to add on to it, when I was in Seattle, I just left there 18 hours ago. But prior to that, the day before yesterday, I was having the same conversation about college, and a 17-year-old kid, is a friend of my buddy, and he had the same conversation, like, what do you want to do? And we're trying to have these kids make this huge decision by the time the age of 18. And I said, shit, I was 40-something. I still didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. We want to put this big decision on some 18-year-old kid. They're like, make a life decision. This is going to be for the rest of your life. And the kids are scared. They don't know what they want to do. But he found that he could have gotten a 2-year degree in doing like chemical welding, and found out he could make $150,000 a year with a 2-year degree in chemical, doing some sort of like specialized welding. And he's like, I'd rather do that than go pursue 4-year college. I'm just do 2 years and starting at $120,000 a year to do some sort of, welding craft that has to do with, I didn't know the details of it, but couldn't understand it. But he explained it to me. I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. So it's all in a choice of career paths. But definitely a big division, going back to the episode 020 with the millennials and everybody. Sandeep was our guest on that show.
Yep.
And we talked about, hiring new people into the car business, like Lloyd's daughter, my sister-in-law, bringing these kids into the business and telling them, hey, do you want to work these long hours? Do you want to put in this, the brain damage? What we went through was our generation, we're Gen Xers. We went through that. It was just, that's what we had learned from our baby boomer parents, taught us that, and their, generation, the depression generation taught them that it was okay to work hard and work long hours and stay at the same place. Well, now going into, these Gen Ys, these Gen X, these Gen Zs, they're not thinking that way. And they just want, something short stint. They don't want to work long hours. They want to have fun. They want to have a lifestyle, which money's not that important to them. So it's hard to find good hires, but you have to kind of, we talked about, building your schedule and tailoring your process, your training and everything to fit these new people that you're hiring. You can't use the old ways of hiring, the old ways of the business on this new generation. You really have to change your business model moving into, or at least your employee model with this new generation. And of course your business model with, everybody with the Carvanas and stuff that we had talked about previous.
Yeah, so on episode 020, to pick up on what you were talking about, one of the things that I liked that Sanjay had said was how important a BYU is, and that you can get in the car business. So like you were able to get from the Navy, like I was able to get in the car business, a backyard university, not going to school to get the piece of paper, but getting real world experience. And when you're dealing with people and you're selling automobiles, I don't know if there's a better life experience that you can get. I mean, I love the time that I spent in the time that we were selling cars. We talked about that in episode 026, the first part in our year in review of, how cool that, experience really was back in 97, 98, 99, 2000. I actually text with Kevin Ichter a little bit through some comments on our YouTube channel. Actually, I think on episode 019, there's a little back and forth there about how cool that time period was and how much I personally learned about people, about business in the car business, which was really, really cool. Moving on to episode 021, that was also another episode where we had a special guest from the Seattle area, and that was somebody that actually commented on your episode, Lloyd. And I think Tamir, maybe worked at a dealership that you had serviced in past. Anyways, he reached out to us, and we had a millennial in the car business perspective, what he liked, what he didn't like. That was a pretty cool episode, and really illustrates the point that David was just making about people coming into the car business and the perceptions of the automotive industry to people that are potentially moving into the car business, is that it seems like there is a negative connotation of being a salesperson in automotive. And I think as an industry, this should be something that we really strive to change because of how cool this industry really is, and how I would invite anybody that's thinking about making a career choice is making sure that they put automotive in that set of opportunity, because of, the longevity of a career that you can make, different career paths that you can take, whether it's in fixed operations or variable operations, moving from sales into F&I, management, general management, owner, dealer. Such a great industry and such, great entrepreneurial spirit that's in this industry. So that was pretty cool. Any thoughts about Tamir and Generation Millennials and Generation Z, Lloyd?
I think what he's doing is very interesting. He's a young man who understands the opportunities here, and he's really trying to capitalize on it. But, and you see this a little bit, but not nearly as much as we could, where people have their private life and then they have their business life. And what a lot of people are using social media to go ahead and say, hey, I am the car guy. I'm the guy you reach out to and connect with. And, when you're willing to go ahead and make your occupation a little bit more of your identity, and within your circle of influence, you're going to have better opportunities if you go ahead and capitalize on that. But there's there's a little caveat to that, is that you have to be authentic in what you're doing, and you have to treat people well, because there's some vulnerability in putting yourself out there in your social network in that way. And, I think for a lot of the younger people that are just getting into the business are trying to make they're at that crossroad right now of trying to decide how much of their job is going to become part of their identity. But the ones that are doing it, I think it helps them recognize they're going to make more income, and they're going to have a better quality of life. I think it's something that you have to embrace, at least in the modern era. You have to embrace it.
What was really cool too is I got a marketing email from Wistia. Wistia is a video platform designed for businesses. They provide a lot of content around how to create video content and use that to market your business, whatever your business is. What I liked about this marketing email that I got today is that they talked about 10 things that they see changing in marketing for 2020. A couple of the things really resonated with me. Number one is they see a decline of the influencer marketing channel as something that has been kind of growing over the past few years. And they transition that into the increase of the ability for companies to create their own podcasts as a marketing channel. So, of course, that's something that resonated with us. I mean, it's something that we've spent the last 6 months, me and David, working on building, the Modern Dealer podcast as a way to really market ourselves, market our individual companies, and associate our persona with what we do for a living. And I think it's kind of cool that you think about influence influencer marketing kind of going away, and you see more of people building their own marketing channels with podcasts. It is a fairly simple way to create great content versus like blog posts and other type of marketing, because really, we do have a couple cameras, we get a couple mics, we can use Zoom meeting, we can just sit here, have a couple topics to discuss, but then it becomes great content to be able to share and build off of. So anyways, what you were saying with creating an association of who you are with what you do, and then building your own personal brand around it, I think is a great way for people to really build their business, whatever it is. And I think it kind of associates with what we were talking about a little while ago with the automotive industry, education, what your daughter is doing for building her own business with a 10-year plan of how she can leverage social media to build her own personal brand and associate her personally with her fashion brand. And, maybe she should consider doing a podcast and leveraging social media, YouTube, Instagram, video content to build that base. So in the next 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, she's going to be able to really become what her brand is. So just some great connections between some of our episodes with the generational divide, the education piece, OK Boomer, online F&I. I like how they kind of all weave together. Any other points on that before we make our transition into episode 2.2 and 2.3?
I would say
No.
just one thing real fast. One thing real fast I would say would be episode 021. He was talking about he's building his YouTube channel to basically make in his market awareness. But David, you're talking about podcasts. Somebody to do something for that. This will all would tie in really well if any of our viewers or anybody. Russell Brunson, he's the creator of ClickFunnels. He did this book. He has a book called Expert Secrets, and basically position yourself like David and I position ourselves as experts in the modern dealer, arena. That how to progress your dealership into the modernization of the car business, is basically positioning yourself as an expert. So any business, if you have a podcast, you are now become the expert of that, because simply saying, hey, have you seen my podcast? I mean, it gives you so much more traction. When I call upon dealers and such and say, hey, I am the co-host of the Modern Dealer podcast. And, we market David markets the Modern Dealer podcast, extremely a lot. It makes it a lot easier to open many more doors with that versus you cold calling. If you're a salesperson from a dealership and you're just like sitting there cold calling, hey, go through the CRM. Here, call these orphan customers. Here's an orphan customer list for you to call. And you're sitting there pounding on the phones for 2 hours and you get nothing out of 200 phone calls versus you being an expert at a dealership. Is what Samir was trying to build this platform by using YouTube, is becoming an expert at his dealership, saying, hey, I am the car guy, and I think he's in Everett, Washington, or Bellevue, one of the cities up there just outside of Seattle. At this Nissan dealership, I'm the internet manager. So I'm the expert. So you want to come see me, here's the reason why. And he would give different episodes on that. That was his expertise as being at that Nissan store. But basically, as I said, if anyone has followed this podcast and you know how much I love Russell Brunson, check out Expert Secrets if you want to, propel your social media, your YouTube, any platform that you're on as a salesperson. Definitely check out Expert Secrets. You will be blown away by all the tips, tricks, and hacks on how to become more of an expert and looked at as the car gal or car guy.
Awesome. What's really cool about too what you were saying right there about being an expert. The beginning of this episode started with Lloyd talking about people becoming industry experts and looking for that gray-haired guy or gray-haired person to be able to, really find out who is the expert in the industry. Now, I think I would recommend anybody and everybody to create their own podcast and create their own online persona to build their own personal business, whether you're selling cars, whether you own a company. It's such a great experience. It's a lot of work, but just totally enjoying it. Now, we only have like 4 minutes left. So what I want to do real quick is just do a quick recap of 22, 3, 4, and 5. And then I want to come up to some closing statements as we wrap up this episode. So 22, we used this opportunity to kind of talk about current events. We talked about current events with the Cybertruck release, the Mustang EV vehicle that was released a few weeks back. And we also talked about Facebook events on how you can use Facebook and social media to market your dealership. Of course, episode 023, David and I, our first on location video, which was at 360 booth here in the Tampa market with our good friend Jay Smithwick. Would definitely highly recommend that you take a look at that. From an online marketing standpoint, you need to have a 360 booth, and we had a great time talking with Jay about that. Episode 024, we talked about Cadillac Live, how manufacturers are leveraging digital to really create looks like we lost Lloyd. Oh, there's coming back. To leverage digital in new and different ways. I love what they're doing, and I really recommend that dealerships look at Cadillac Live and see what you can do to do that yourself. I was actually talking with a couple of our clients over the last couple of weeks, and they were talking about creating a Cadillac Live type experience for the Tier 3 retailer. And then real quick, episode 025, wrapping up with our first non-automotive guest, Sue B. Zimmerman. A lot of great information. I would recommend your daughter watch this. Lloyd, a great way to build brands using Instagram. So that was a really great episode, and David Bertoncini set that up. So we only have about 2 minutes left here. Do you have a few closing thoughts, David, and then you, Lloyd?
Real fast closing thoughts. The first, 25 episodes of the Modern Dealer podcast. It's been phenomenal. It's been great. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed watching David and myself and guests that we've had on the show, that you're getting some good nuggets that you can bring back to your dealership and use immediately at your store. My 3 tips always being, hey, just apply something that we've covered in our episode. Have an open mind. And just had a potential guest wanting to come on our show, and his GM told him that he couldn't go on to a podcast because he didn't believe that podcasting was a good idea. This is coming from a GM this year in 2020. They said, I don't think a podcast is a good idea. So get rid of the old thinking. That's my 3 tips. Lloyd?
Can you guys hear me okay? I had to switch audio.
Yep. You're perfect.
Perfect. So, the only thing I would recommend is if you're going to do a podcast or any kind of, if you're going to put out any content, and this is not something that I do on a regular basis, but, definitely make sure that what you're putting out is useful, it's helpful, because nobody wants to listen to something that they're not learning tips or hacks or some way to increase their level of success. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. And I appreciate that. And we literally have about 30 seconds left. So I just want to take another moment to thank you, David, for the last 26 episodes. I really look forward to what we're going to do in 2020. I appreciate your time today, Lloyd, for joining us. And I really appreciate the dialogue that we've had. So for David and Lloyd, that's a wrap.
yelling, David.